Tip number 1. Choose location carefully. Choose a location for your garden that gets plenty of sun and is close to your water source, usually your garden hose. Most vegetables need about 6 hours of sunlight a day. Fruiting plants like tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, and pumpkins even like 8 to 10 hours. Plant taller crops like corn, tall tomatoes, or pole beans on the north or west side of the garden so they don't shade the other plants. If you do have shade in parts of your garden, consider planting cool plants such as lettuce, peas, spinach, collards, and root veggies like potatoes, carrots, turnips, and beets. These plants like a cooler environment and appreciate the shade during the hotter seasons. Keep your plants out of strong winds that could break their tender stems or keep the beneficial insects away from them. If you need to, install a windscreen or plant your garden in a more protected area. Avoid areas of high foot traffic too. Tender plants can easily be broken or killed by kids during a short cut through the garden. Look for an area that gets enough water without flooding. You want the soil moist, but not sodden. In addition, you'll want to make sure your garden is as level as possible. This will help drainage and make your job easier when it comes to planting and harvesting. If you'd like to craft raised beds, bottomless frames that raise the soil above the grade line, to make harvesting even easier, create those before you get started. Have everything in place before you even begin your garden. Tip number 2. Test your soil. You always want to start with healthy soil. You can get a soil testing kit from your local extension agent. Let them know you're trying organic farming and they'll give you lots of expert tips. You need to know whether or not your soil is healthy enough before you put the first plant into the ground. For many of us urban dwellers, the soil has been depleted of nutrients or simply trucked in for construction purposes. A good soil test will also give you expert recommendations on how to fix whatever may be wrong. Soil pH, for example, is important for helping your plants access the nutrients they need in that soil. The pH tells how acidic or alkaline your soil may be. The most important soil component is the organic matter, like manure, peat, moss, or compost. Your finished soil should be neither sandy nor too compact. When the mix is right, the soil will bind together when squeezed, but break back apart if disturbed. It will retain enough water without saturating your plants. Compost is the best option for organic matter because it contains decayed microorganisms from plants and is naturally healthier for your crops. You can make your own compost heap or buy ready-made compost at the garden store. Be sure to look for organic compost, however. Reduce weed growth by spreading a 1 to 3 inch layer of mulch on top of your soil. This will also lessen fungal disease spores landing on your plants and will keep the plants cooler in summer and warmer in winter. Use an organic material like cocoa hulls, weed-free straw, or even newspaper. These will also add beneficial organic matter to your soil as they decompose. You may or may not need fertilizer, depending on how good your original soil is. If you feel you need it, look for well-rotted manure from plant-eating animals like horses, rabbits, sheep, or chickens. You can also buy organic fertilizer at your garden store. Be careful though. Too much nitrogen, the first number on the fertilizer package, will give you lush green plants, but fewer veggies to harvest. It's best to get your soil as healthy as possible without resorting to fertilizer. Tip number 3. Use planters. If you don't have a large yard, you don't have to give up your dreams of vegetable harvesting. Most veggies do quite well in planters, whether it is a smaller windowsill garden or a larger outdoor container. Invest in the proper planters and follow the directions as if you had a larger garden. You'll be collecting your very own produce in practically no time. You can even build a self-watering container. Going vertical is a great way to contain your garden as well. Give your vining plants tomatoes, whole beans, squash, melons, cucumbers, etc., a trellis or support and watch them grow. They take up far less space this way and are decorative as well. Harvest time is easier with a vertical garden too, because you can easily see each vegetable. Your vertical plants will pick up fewer diseases and fungal spores because less of the plant is in contact with the soil. Make sure your containers get plenty of natural light or use a professional grow bulb that will give them the needed raw material for growth. If your plants are outside, consider planting some companions to help them out, like flowers that attract beneficial insects or repel harmful ones. Tip number 4, grow based on your location. Decide what you want to plant based on your climate, space, tastes, available time, and level of expertise. Newcomers might want to start with some of the easier plants, like carrots, beans, cucumbers, peppers, and lettuce. You won't need to baby these plants or have an expert's knowledge of soil conditions. Growing conditions and ripening cycles are also going to be different based on the plant, your climate, and the season. Don't plan to start all your plants at the same time. Check the planting information on seed packets or seedlings, or look it up online on a site like the Old Farmer's Almanac or Urban Farmer. You're looking for the planting calendar. Create your gardening schedule so that you can plant and harvest everything according to its natural cycle. This takes a bit of planning, but it's well worth it in the end when you begin harvesting your own organic foodstuffs. Cool season plants like lettuce, spinach, and root veggies can be planted in spring. Put in greens, peas, potatoes, carrots, beets, and other cool weather crops early. But warm season veggies like tomatoes and peppers shouldn't be planted until the soil warms up. The best dates for each crop will vary by location, so check with your nursery or local cooperative extension service. Be careful how many of each type of plant you have as well. Tomatoes and zucchini are prolific producers, and you may be overwhelmed if you have too many of these. One of the basic problems a beginning gardener faces is overestimating how many plants they need. Start small and only grow what you know you'll be able to eat. For a family of 4, the following tips will give you a good garden with a little left over for canning or trading. Make your garden 10 feet long with 11 rows in it. These rows should run north to south in order to take advantage of sunlight. If this is way too large, simply cut it in half or plant fewer rows. Make sure you leave a nice pathway in between each row so you can weed and harvest without brushing up against the plants and breaking off leaves and stems. Be sure to take into account the amount of space each plant needs. For example, you might plant 9 bush beans in a 10 square foot bed because they need about 4 inches between plants. Or you could plant 16 onions since they can be planted 3 inches apart. Tip number 5, think outside the box. Pay attention to how you arrange your plants to maximize your yield. If space is at a premium, instead of planting in rows or squares, why not try going with a triangle? You can fit 10 to 14% more plants in a triangle than in a square. Just be careful not to space the plants too closely. When one researcher increased the space between romaine lettuce plants from 8 to 10 inches, the harvest weight per plant doubled. Weight per yield per square foot is a more valuable indicator than number of plants per square foot. As in so many things, quality of plant yield is better than quantity of plants. Also, instead of using up valuable garden space for a vining plant, consider going vertical. Create a trellis, cage, or simple net support for your tomatoes, whole beans, squash, melons, cucumbers, etc. You'll be able to more easily see the fruits on a vertical plant, so harvest time will be easier. The improved air circulation among the leaves also repels fungal diseases. And don't worry about securing the heavy fruit. Even squash and melons will develop thicker stems for support. Speaking of outside the box, did you know that 45 minutes of gardening burns the same amount of calories as running 1.5 miles in 15 minutes? Gardening is healthy in more ways than one. It gets you out in the fresh air and sunshine. You need that vitamin D. Digging, planting, and weeding are good low-impact forms of repetitive exercise. Regular physical activity not only helps you feel better, it relieves stress, boosts energy, and relieves tension. You also waste less food when you garden. In the United States, organic waste is the second highest component of landfills. It's the largest source of our methane emissions. The UN Environmental Program estimates 30% of the food supply is wasted. That's around 20 pounds of food per person per month. If you're gardening, you're less likely to waste the results of your hard labor. You might can or otherwise preserve your crops, or trade it for something different from a neighboring gardener.